The ship glided out of the harbor, slowly gathering speed as its sails caught the brisk coastal breeze. Standing atop the quay wall with their father, Ffxiv, Alphino and Alice bore witness to the vessel's departure, watched as Louisoix Levior, their beloved grandsire, was carried away across the sea. And then he was gone. Alphino's voice was barely a whisper, his gaze fixed upon the dwindling form of the ship. Alice glanced at her brother with red-rimmed eyes, but said nothing. The twins had greeted the news of their grandfather's forthcoming journey very differently. While one accepted his decision with a calm practicality, the other had railed and wept. Still, to see the two of them there, upon the quay, their slight arms hugging hefty grimoires as if their young lives depended on it, one would struggle to tell them apart. For they were not so different as they cared to believe. Even had you not gained admission to the studium and made me exceedingly proud in so doing, these gifts would have been yours regardless. Here, one for each of you. When read together, these two grimoires form a single tome. Support one another's studies. I have no doubt that you will soon come to understand the lessons inscribed therein. The volumes Louisoix gave to his grandchildren, scant hours before his departure, were curious indeed. Crafted such that the contents of one could not be deciphered without the other. They hinted at the impish humor which danced behind the oft-times solemn visage of Charleon's preeminent sage and scholar. Thank you, grandfather. Alphino accepted his grimoire with a practiced grace and dignity. Alice, meanwhile, received her gift distractedly and swiftly resumed her attempts to dissuade Louisoix from his course.
Must you leave, grandfather? Is there naught I can say to make you stay?
Please, my dear, we have spoken about this. It had been almost a month since the twins first learned that Archon Louisoix would be leaving Charleon for the shores of Eorzea. His purpose, he had partially explained, was to aid the distant realm in forestalling the ruinous arrival of the Seventh Umbral Era. Sensing the fixity of his grandsire's resolve, Alphino had chosen to swallow his melancholy and voice no word of complaint. Not so his sister, nor less his father, Ffxiv. Alice protested the journey purely out of her abiding love for Louisoix and the unbearable thought of his absence. Ffxiv's strident objections were of a more political nature. Louisoix's eldest son was an influential member of the Forum, the body responsible for shaping Charleon policy. And he, like so many of his colleagues, was a staunch opponent of military intervention. It was, he believed, the duty of his countrymen to chronicle the world's affairs, not to interfere in them. When the steel-clad wolves of the Garlean Empire descended upon Alamigo, it was Ffxiv and his fellows who had attempted to parley a peace. In the bitter wake of that failed negotiations, however, they saw no recourse but to forsake the colony they had built within the borders of the war-threatened realm. Following 5 years of elaborate and painstaking preparation, the plan to evacuate the settlement's entire population to the northern archipelago of their homeland was put into motion. In the year 1562 of the Sixth Astral Era, the city of Charleon, a renowned center of learning, situated in the Dravanian lowlands, became an uninhabited shell in the space of a single night. The twins knew that they themselves had taken part in this exodus, but could claim no recollections of the momentous event, being less than 1 summer old at the time. War is the favored resort of the uncivilized and the ignorant, father, began Ffxiv, seeking to launch his own sortie upon the heels of his daughter's plea. The wise abjure it. As Charleons, it is our task to observe, to chart the course of history, not to change it. Civilization shall not be advanced through petty conflict, but by the passing of recorded knowledge from generation to generation. My mind will not be changed, Ffxiv, Louisoix responded wearily. They had had this conversation almost word for word, perhaps a dozen times in as many days. To ignore the plight of those one might conceivably save is not wisdom, it is indolence. And as such, a passive stance will not, I fear, take us far upon the path to progress. That you would spare these younglings the horror of war is a decision with which I am in full agreement. Exhorting you or any other to return to Eorzea at my side We all must protect that which we hold most dear, in the manner of our own choosing. And so the discussion ended as it always did, with neither willing to deviate from the script of their oft-rehearsed play. Alphino and Alice, it must be said, were children of exceptional intelligence. So advanced were they in their studies of etheric theory and other such esoteric subjects that both had gained acceptance to the studium at the tender age of 11. Thus it was that the sharp-minded Alphino, while able to recognize the logic in his father's arguments, could also see that his grandfather's cause was just. That the boy remained silent then stemmed not from simple stoicism, but from a keen sense of his own inadequacy, a realization that his unpolished skills would yet prove more hindrance than help. Though no less bright, Alice eschewed her brother's affected maturity, and gave vent to her discontent, inwardly cursing Alphino all the while for his mute acceptance of their grandfather's decision. How could he simply stand there and say nothing? A small yet conspicuous crack had appeared between the siblings. It was long after Louisoix had taken ship and vanished over the horizon that the fateful day came. Alphino and Alice were crowded into the studium's observatory, along with their professors and a throng of fellow students. The assembled sages and would-be scholars huddled around the base of the giant telescope, each taking their turn to gaze upon the looming spectacle of the red moon Dalamud.
Dalamud has shattered!
Alice cried out, pressing her face closer to the telescope's eyepiece so that it dug into her cheek. The view provided by the device's array of magnifying lenses was distorted and indistinct, but the fate of the satellite was unmistakable. She could see its crimson-fringed silhouette breaking apart in the skies over Cartano.
Shattered?
What?
Before it struck the ground?
How is this possible? Excited murmurs and hastily formed theories erupted from the teachers and pupils alike.
Grandfather has saved Eorzea!
Alice turned to find her brother's face, her eyes glistening with tears of joy and relief. Shouldering aside his madly grinning sibling, Alphino squinted through the ocular lens. Though the air was thick with billowing clouds of smoke and ash, he was forced to agree with Alice's assessment. Dalamud was no more. But something was awry. Alphino continued to scrutinize the distant scene. The red moon's bloody glow had been replaced by an equally unsetting incandescent rain, as if the heavens themselves were weeping tears of light. Something had gone terribly, terribly awry. Dalamud's spectacular demise gave rise to a tidal wave of etheric energy, which rendered link shells all but useless for a period of many days. During this time, the Levieur siblings were left to stew upon the wonders they had viewed from afar. Eventually, a letter from Urianger arrived, a missive detailing the events that had befallen Eorzea. The Archon's elegant script described horrors the twin could scarce bear to picture. From the cracked husk of the red moon had emerged a dragon primal beyond imagining, an incarnation of wrath and raging flame that had laid waste to the land for malms in every direction. Undeterred, Louisoix had persisted with his plan to call forth the power of the 12, and though the exact events that followed were unclear, it seemed the abomination of Bahamut had been banished. When the siblings reached the conclusion of Urianger's staggering account, however, the pale flame of hope which both had been nursing was finally extinguished. On the broken fields of Cartano did my dearest mentor, thy beloved grandsire, become as light and embark upon his final journey. Alphino's shoulders trembled with quiet sorrow, while Alice wailed aloud, caring not who heard her grief. 5 years later, a ship once more glided slowly out of the harbor. Alphino and Alice stood on the gently rolling deck, watching the gradually shrinking figure of their father alone upon the quay. Recent graduates of the studium, the twins were now 16 summers old enough to be considered of age in Sharlayan society. And so, although he opposed his children's planned journey, Fortunal had not sought to bar their way. And now it is our turn, murmured Alphino, thinking back to the day of their grandsire's departure. We follow in grandsire's wake, replied Alice. Looking over at her, Alphino was struck by how widely their convictions differed. As they gripped the rail, however, identical grimoires now hanging from their belts, one could hardly tell them apart. No, they were not so different as they cared to believe.
Hey all, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, praise the 12 by giving it a like and comment, or by subscribing. It goes a long way to helping the channel. Don't forget, new videos every week, and if you want to engage with us further, why not check out our Discord and Patreon in the link below and become a part of our community. With that said, see you around, fellow Archons.